The rumors are true. The Cobra Aerojet irons are real. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. I have in my hands a club that officially does not exist yet. Might next year, but you're getting a sneak peek at it now because I have been able to get my hands on something that has not been announced. So what I have here is the Cobra Aerojet irons. I was kind of wondering, because we have seen leaked photos of the Aerojet driver, if they were going to come out with a matching set of irons. They almost always do. The LTDx driver and irons, Rad Speed driver and irons, so they almost always do. But there was no information about it, and I was able to get my hands on this. And what I can tell you is that it's not like I'm going against an embargo with Cobra or anything like that. They did not send this to me. But I was able to get my hands on this through someone else who I have no idea how they procured it, but I have it now, and it is mine. And I was just checking it out. Now, I will say I only have this one club. This is a sand wedge, so a very useful club to have. Kind of would be weird if I just had a 7-iron. It's not something necessarily you can use, but when you are able to order the whole set, you can probably get the matching set, and sometimes you just get a rando sand wedge to put in your bag because you like it. That being said, I think this is going to be unique in some ways. Now, this looks like a lot of the other Cobra clubs. What we get here is a KBS shaft, PGI 75R. That might be the standard shaft. You can see we have the traditional cross-line grip here. This does not have the Arcos Connect in it, but I think you can get that. But I really like this. Feels good in the hand. Now, this looks a lot like the LTDx irons to me. And in fact, what I have here is my LTDx one length gap wedge, because I actually don't have the sand wedge in the LTDx. And there is a lot of similarities between these two. Even at a glance, like the colors are very similar here. Now, what I have noticed is that there is just a slight difference between these two, and I kind of took a magnet to them too to see if the materials were all the same. I think they're pretty much the same, even though this is a gap wedge and this is a sand wedge. Let's take a close look, because I think I can tell what some of the differences are, but without cutting this thing open, I can't tell you what all of them are. So hopefully we'll find out soon, and then we'll hit the range with it. Alright, so here I have the two wedges. Again, not exactly the same wedge, but you can see them side by side here. I think they are both stainless steel heads. What you might be able to see here is that the sand wedge has a decent amount of bounce. It is a little deeper front to back than the gap wedge. Kind of wish I had the LTDx sand wedge just to see if it has a little bit more butt here on the back to prevent that digging, but otherwise they're pretty similar. There's a little bit of shape difference, but much of this is just design. If I rotate it here to the front, you can see very similar. It's not exactly high toe, not full face grooves. Almost everything is about the same here. On my LTDx, it says milled face right there. I suspect that this is a milled face, even though it doesn't say it. Now, one of the things that I will tell you is missing from this is right on the toe end here. Now, the LTDx has this screw-in weight there. This one does not here. I actually don't know if the sand wedge has that in this, but I suspect it does. I feel like that was a feature of the LTDXs, and the Aerojets are going to get rid of that. Now, I will tell you that I do not know how they are having weight in here. What I understand in the LTDx is that there was this steel bar on the bottom, then they had this toe weight in there so that you could adjust it or have it customized. Obviously, this does not have any ability to have the weight adjusted, at least not externally, but I have a feeling they might have that similar weight in there. You can see this kind of design aesthetic. It kind of looks like a band being stretched from both sides here, kind of like a web almost. This little piece here is very reminiscent of what we see on the Aerojet driver, and so I'm hoping that there is a pretty big chunk of steel in there to provide obviously weight, but then you have a lighter material around there, helps it fly, but provide some stability and forgiveness on off-center hits. Now, one thing that I would love, and I don't think that this is the way it's going to be, I would love for the body or the face of this to be titanium, and then there be like a tungsten weight down here, kind of like the new Cobra Great Big Bertha irons. I think those are the ones that are doing that. So you have really light weight materials around the head, and then the weight is really centralized right here, low and to the ground. And what that does is provides really high ball flights. It moves something like 90 grams of weight around, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's really an evolution of this. Now, a couple of things that I will say are also missing. This little plastic part here used to say power bridge on some of them, and then on the bottom it would say power shell. Now, when you get to the wedges, I actually don't think you have the PowerShell technology. I actually didn't see that printed on here either, and that doesn't surprise me. I think once you get past the pitching wedge, you don't have the power shell, which is this face being this separate, really thin piece that is welded into the wedge itself or the club itself. And I think that's because the way the wedges are, they're just kind of a solid piece as opposed to more of the multi-piece that you get on some of the more mid-range irons, the 5, 6, 7 iron. But I might be wrong about that, and just because it doesn't say power shell, you know, right here it doesn't say power shell on my gap wedge either, but on some of the other irons it does. So that's why I think that this one might not have power shell technology in it either. I will also tell you that this has this medallion, which looks to be black plastic. I think on the Rad Speed it was 3D printed. This also looks like this is black plastic too. It has a little bit more of a raised area right here. I'm not sure why that is, but the aesthetic is pretty similar. They're not that different here. Even the color scheme, they kind of go with this red, white, and blue here on the one length, which I really like. Obviously a little carbon fiber accent right there, which is also pretty similar. So really between the LTDx and the Aerojet here, not a lot of big aesthetic differences. Honestly, if you were to walk up to someone that had LTDx irons in their bag and Aerojet irons in their bag, you probably wouldn't be able to tell at a glance that they are the new generation of irons. This is really the biggest piece here. I'm not even sure what that plastic piece in there is for, but that is what they look like, and they're pretty similar. Now, I will tell you that I don't know exactly what the loft on in this is, but I think it's 54, because when I looked at the specs for the LTDx irons, the sand wedge is 54 degrees. Now, this is a gap wedge, and so it's not exactly 54 degrees. I don't have the sand wedge, but I do have a 54 degree wedge, and that is my Adele SMS wedge here, and I really love this, and this one is actually in 54 degrees, as it says right there on the toe. So what I thought I would do, and this isn't going to be a great test, and it's certainly not going to be a test that I want you to base your purchase decision on, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these to the simulator and I'm going to hit them all. Now, I would expect this to be longer than this. I would expect the gap wedge to be longer than the sand wedge, but these two here, being the same loft, I would expect this to be longer than my Adele. There's a couple reasons for that. Obviously, the Adele doesn't really have anything that makes it forgiving. It's meant to be a precision club, shapeable, manipulable, and there is nothing really forgiving about that. On top of that, I have extra weights in this club to make it really heavy because I want a lot of control going through turf. So I think this is going to be a little lighter. I don't know exactly what this is, but I think it's 380 grams or something. So I expect this to be a little lighter, a little easier to swing, probably more forgiving, probably going to be greater distance, even though they're the same loft. But I would actually expect these to be pretty similar in just overall performance. Because we have a high lofted, weak lofted club here, this isn't going to be great for testing differences in ranges, but I'm going to hit all three. We'll look at the data and just see what this new Aerojet iron does. I'll tell you what, the new Aerojet driver, that's hopefully coming out pretty soon, is something that I am leaning towards buying. Without seeing any testing or data or anything on it, I just feel like it is going to be a little bit better than my LTDx driver, and I really love that driver. And so if there's a little bit more forgiveness in that one, which is what I'm expecting the new feature to be, then I will probably benefit from that being a bad golfer. The new Aerojet irons, though, I expect to have almost no discernible benefits over the LTDx irons. I just don't know, and especially looking at them, I don't see anything that says I am incorporating some great new technology. Like I said, I was excited because I thought maybe they'd go like the Callaways and exotic materials here, go up in price point, low tungsten weights, but doesn't look like they've done that. In fact, looks like they've dropped the weight out of the toe, so it looks like they're making them even less adjustable, but maybe more for the masses and maybe even a little bit more affordable. But I just don't expect you to take the gap wedge in this set compared to the gap wedge in the LTDx line and have it perform any better or any of the other irons. Unless there was something really different about these, like a much deeper flange here, better bounce, the weight moved back, maybe even more of a hybrid or even more of a game improvement iron. I expect them to be pretty similar. But we will see, and I don't know, if I get a chance to review a whole set, I would certainly love to do that. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to take these clubs, head off to the simulator, and just see what it does.
I'm alright, nobody worry about me. Why you got to give me a fight? Can't you just let it be? I'm alright, don't nobody worry about me. Why you got to give me a fight? Can't you just let me be? Do what you like, doing it naturally. But if it's
All right, Golf Nation. I just got back from the simulator, crunched some data, emailed myself the export from the Foresight in the GC Hawk here to see what we did. So the first thing I thought I would show you here is my results with the Adele club here, because the Adele is actually the same loft, 54 degrees, as the Cobra Aerojet. We'll see. I expected this to be the shortest one, and I was averaging 69 yards on average with this club. So that makes sense because I think it's 25 grams heavier than a standard wedge here. There's nothing about it that's designed to have a springy face or anything like that. So it's just kind of old school wedge technology, and I love it. It's awesome. The other thing I would say about this, and I didn't remember it until I had it next to the other wedges, is that my L wedges are an inch shorter than my other clubs. So I shorten them up to give myself even more control. So that's also going to rob you of a little speed. And again, I don't take full swings with my wedges. I take 75% swings just because I feel like that's getting a little out of control and I'm looking for more control. So 69 yards with the 56 degree, I'd say that's pretty typical. It's all carry. Basically, they just sit when they hit the ground. So if you're looking for a really good wedge that just sits, sit, boo-boo, sit, the Adele wedges are fantastic for that. All these wedges, I think, are pretty good. All right. So what's the next one here? Oh, look at that. It is the Cobra Aerojet sand wedge, which I believe is 54 degrees. So it's the same loft, but it is longer. So it is 6 yards longer than the Adele wedge. So same loft, but two things. It's an inch longer. And just through the way they make this, perimeter weighted, really low weight. I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but obviously a low center of gravity to help the ball fly a little higher. It's also a little bit lighter than my Adele. So all of that adds up to what I would expect. A little longer shaft, a little lighter weight, a little bit lower CG, and it flies farther. So 6 yards farther. So if you have an old school wedge that doesn't have any tech in it, you might expect the Aerojet to get an extra yard or two out of it. But I would say that if you have a 54 degree wedge, the Aerojet wedge seems to be about the same. Now, remember, if you go up to some of the stronger lofted clubs, I think they bring in some other technology, right? Some of that flex face stuff and whatnot. Now, here's a big comparison I think that you're waiting for. The Cobra LTDx gap wedge versus the Aerojet sand wedge. And this isn't going to be totally fair. 47 degrees versus 54 degrees. So we're talking about 7 degrees stronger here. And same length. I was getting an average of 91 yards with my LTDx. So would have been interesting to have a 54 degree LTDx, but I don't have it. Limited resources here at the Panda Research Institute. We're trying to do things on a budget. As you can tell, all of the staff here are on this video. 91 yards with the 47 degrees. So is that about what I would expect? Yeah, I guess so. 91 yards, but to 70 yards. And I would say that where I fill this gap, you might be saying, the gaps in your clubs are too large. I actually have an Adele 50 degree as well. So sometimes I bag it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just choke up on the LTDx gap wedge because, like I said, it's an inch longer. So I've got a little bit of a play there to shorten it up. But 91 yards on that LTDx, it's a great club. I love it. What do I think about the LTDx versus the Aerojet? I just would be surprised if there is a huge difference in the technology. I think they're probably pretty similar. I think if you have the LTDx, I bet if you have the rad speed, if you have the speed zones, I just don't really expect anything from speed zone to the Aerojet and equivalent clubs to be that much different. The speed zone had a ton of tech in it, right? That springy welded on face and the low center of gravity and the heel weighting and the perimeter weighting and carbon fiber strip at the top to lighten up the top and reduce the CG. Anything in the last 4 or 5 years in terms of irons and wedges, I think are going to be great. So I think the club is great. In fact, you probably didn't see it in my shots there, but the Aerojet was extremely straight. Like, I don't even think I put the straightest shots in there. I just put the ones that represented what I was generally getting, mostly for distance, but it was so straight. It was just like on the line. My shot is just maybe a little left of the line often, but man, I just noticed that even on the off-center hits, I was just still sending them pretty straight. So it's got to be forgiving. And if that's maybe the theme for the Aerojet irons and drivers, is that it's just the most forgiving club ever, I would say I believe that, because Limited experience, limited amount of clubs, just one. But man, it was forgiving because there were a couple shots that I removed from the data, especially with the Adele, that I caught it on the hosel, I caught it on the toe or whatever, and they just do their own thing. Like I said, the Adele clubs are not clubs that I usually use full shots. These are more for putting a ball right on line, 40 yards out, 30 yards out, that kind of shot. So that's really what I look to them for. But between the LTDx and the Cobra Aerojet, probably pretty similar. But if I were to guess in my gut, I would say the Aerojet is probably more forgiving, but probably similar performance. So I really liked it. It's a good looking club. Looks a whole lot like the LTDx. Performs a whole lot like the LTDx. But as a bad golfer, I can tell you that the Aerojet seemed to really create some nice shots, no matter how hard I tried at making a bad or inadvertently making a bad shot. So anyway, if you want to pick up the Aerojet, I highly recommend it. That's just one test with one club, but I'm looking forward to trying out the other ones. And I don't know that I'll be upgrading to the irons, but I will be upgrading to the driver just because there's so much potential. And hopefully, I'm betting that it's not going to be worse than the LTDx driver. So if you want to pick up any of these clubs, I'll put links to them all. All these wedges are absolutely fantastic, and I'm really excited about the new line of clubs from Cobra nonetheless. So that's it. Peter Von Panda, out.
We can discover more and explore so much deeper. We can live better than ever thanks to Peter Von Panda.